that is near and dear to my heart, as we're going to be following the old main line of the Virginian Railway from Deepwater to a little south of Mullins to a place called Elmore, West Virginia. Along the way, we'll take a look at some of the active branch lines that still feed into this venerable old railroad. The story of the Virginian is an interesting one, but it's not one you hear a whole lot about, so we'll take a look at some of the road's history as we take a look at some modern operations on the old road. So without further ado, let's get going. If there was ever a place to be considered the birthplace of the Virginian, it's Deepwater, West Virginia. The Virginian traced its history back to 1898 with the formation of the small Deepwater Railway. This operation grew from a short 5-mile logging railroad that ran from Deepwater to a sawmill at Robson. Once incorporated, it was planned to connect to C&O here at Deepwater and run to Glangeen at first, and then a plan was hatched to connect to Norfolk and Western at Matoka. The plan was basically to be the middleman, loading coal cars for C&O and N&W to take them to Newport News and Norfolk respectively. Thing is, both C&O and N&W presented unacceptable freight rates to the tiny Deepwater as a means of scaring them off. The men at the helm of the Deepwater, Mr. Henry Huddleston Rogers and Colonel William Nelson Page, had other plans. It just so happened that Mr. Rogers had gotten in basically on the ground floor of Standard Oil and was a very rich man. He teamed up with Page not only to finance an expansion of the Deepwater, but a sister railroad in building in Virginia, the Tidewater Railway. The Tidewater had the exact same board as Deepwater. Its funds were coming from the exact same place, and it had a charter to build to the West Virginia state line, just as the Deepwater had a charter to build to the Virginia state line, yet no one noticed. In 1907, the Tidewater changed its name to the Virginian Railway and quickly swallowed up its older sister. In January 1909, the two building crews finally met in Glen Lynn, Virginia, and the Unified Virginian Railway was born. 115 years later, you can still catch trains rolling through Deepwater on both the C&O and the Virginian, including here at this bridge, which, while only here since the 30s, still proudly displays the Virginian name, 65 years after that name passed into corporate history. In 1959, the Virginian was bought out by the Norfolk and Western, and in 1982, N&W merged with Southern to create the modern Norfolk Southern. The bridge in Deepwater was constructed to connect Virginian to the New York Central on the north side of the Kanawha River. Virginian ran 2 daily mixed freight trains using trackage rights to reach the Central Yard in Quincy, and used the bridge to take its passenger trains into Charleston. Some coal went west, but it was never a huge business. Today, trains use the bridge to connect to the old New York Central and low coal trains just like this one. In 2016, Norfolk Southern leased operations on the old Virginian from Deepwater to Maben, and the former New York Central from Columbus, Ohio, through Charleston, down past Golly Bridge out to Drennan to shortline operator Watco, who operated as the Kanawha River Railroad. We're a little past Robson now, heading back towards Deepwater with an empty train on the way. Let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing while we have a second. A Kanawha River Railroad crew is in the cab of that lead NS engine with some former NS engines owned by Watco assigned here helping. It's not a bad grade coming down empty, but try pushing a loaded train up a near 2% grade without that help and see what happens. Hint, it won't end well. The grade tops out at about 1.84% near Oak Hill Junction, but it's pretty much all uphill out of deep water. Page was the home of locomotive facilities and a good-sized yard during the Virginian era. Mine runs working the Beards Fork and White Oak branches were based out of Page, as well as those serving mainline mines between Pax and Deepwater. Today, there's still an active mine at Page, but they don't load that often. I've never been lucky enough to catch them down here while they're loading, if that tells you anything. 18 miles down the line is the town of Pax. It's about the last place you'd expect to have two railroads, but it does. The Virginia connected here to the Kanawha, Glen Jean, and Eastern, and eventually the KGJ&E was bought by the Chesapeake and Ohio, and that became a C&O connection. Both railroads are still active, and with manned helpers on the Virginian in plain view of a modern interstate, it's fun to see old-fashioned transportation and new side by side. As this train passes the town hall here in Pax, first thing I think is I'm glad I got this train, because you won't see a leader like this again. This is the General Electric C44-9W, or as we call it, a Dash 9. This locomotive was nearly 25 years old and still wore what we call the thoroughbred paint scheme. That is the Norfolk Southern logo without the horse head. This engine will likely be rebuilt and serve many more years with a different number and that horse head logo. Lake Stevens is one of the most beautiful places in southern West Virginia. While most people go here for a day on the lake or to enjoy the scenery, my favorite view is right across the street from the front entrance looking right at the Virginian Main. In April 2024, we caught Anthony heading up to Deepwater and beyond. Note the 2 yellow engines in our train. Those are former Union Pacific engines. After years on the UP, Watco acquired them and sent them to West Virginia. Slab Fork is best known as the home of music legend Bill Withers, but to us rail fans it's a great example of Virginian architecture still at work. The 613-foot-long bridge here is still in use. I'm standing where the old station used to be here, watching these empties head back up to mine. In the Virginian era, there was also a mainline mine here, operated by the Slab Fork Coal Company. Just south of Mullins is Elmore Yard. Elmore was the main yard on the west end of the Virginian. Coal from the mines was classified here and put together for the trip east up the Clark's Gap grade. We'll go more into this part of the railroad in the future, but basically to conquer the grade, Virginian had to do what it called hill runs, where they cut outbound coal trains from Elmore into two pieces for the trip up the top of the grade at Algonquin. At Algonquin, they parked it there, and then went back to Elmore for the second half of the train. The combined train was then taken on what Virginian called a Roanoke run. From Roanoke, the train then went on to Norfolk. There are still two Virginian branch lines active today, the Winding Gulf branch and the Guyandotte River branch. We'll view a train on each one, beginning with the Guyandotte River branch at Itman. As we watch a train passing one that's being loaded, it might not be a bad idea to take some time out for some vocabulary. What we would call this in the modern railroad world would be a loadout. What you would probably hear it be called most often by the general public is a tipple. Why that changed, I don't know. But the origin of the tipple goes back, for those who might not know, to cars of coal being tipped into the top of a structure to then be dumped into rail cars sitting in siding at the mine. "9.9 miles from Gulf Junction in Mullins is a small outpost of Helen, West Virginia. At one time, the mine here was served by both the Virginian and the Chesapeake and Ohio. Today, it's mostly Norfolk Southern trains that roll through here on their way past Sophia to load. Fun fact, while this is a Virginian branch, Helen was named for the daughter of the C&O president when it was founded in 1919, Mr. G.W. Stevens. Thank you so much